Now we bring in our top guest this evening, Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey. And on top of all this, Pat, all this that I just mentioned, the administration wants to put a graduate of Moscow State University on the V.I. Lenin Personal Academic Scholarship, by the way, who hates banks, she hates banks, and she wants to nationalize them like the good old Soviet Gosbank, and they nominated her to be controller of the currency. Now, Senator, you addressed this earlier on the floor of the Senate. Let's all take a listen to what you said.
What she wants to do, and I quote, this is her words, effectively end banking as we know it, end quote. The Federal Reserve would set prices in large sectors of the U.S. economy, those that she deems to be, quote, systemically important prices, end quote. She advocates that the government, acting through the Fed, would actually cut off credit to those deemed, quote, socially suboptimal, end quote. Can you imagine? Is there...
So, okay, well said, well put. So, Senator Toomey, welcome back, number one. And number two, can you stop this nonsense? Because this is pure insanity.
It is literally unbelievable. I didn't think I could be surprised by anything that the administration would do. I will confess, I'm not surprised. I'm shocked. I mean, this is the definition of socialism, right? Nationalizing our banks, having the Fed become the retail bank. Oh, and then having the Fed allocate credit based on, I guess, how well everybody does on some kind of social score. My God, this is unbelievable. If we can't derail this nominee, then I don't know what to tell you. I can't imagine that there'd be a single Republican vote in favor of this nominee. I haven't spoken with every last one of my Republican colleagues yet, but I will. And then the question is there a single Democrat who will acknowledge it's probably not a good idea to have a person with these ideas in charge of oversight and supervision and regulation of all of our national banks?
Which, by the way, I'm not told, but it's been in print that Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, whoself is, you know, a pretty strong liberal, now progressive, but she was opposed to this nomination, and she was overridden. And I want to ask you, Senator, so she wants to, Amoroso wants the Fed to set prices. And the cutoff point, here's something I don't understand. The cutoff point for people who are socially suboptimal, what does that mean, socially suboptimal?
I don't know what that means, but it's obviously terrifying, right? I mean, my goodness, the Chinese Communist Party has set up a sort of social index to monitor its population, and who knows how they're going to punish people that don't quite measure up. That's the clearest parallel that I'm aware of. I don't know exactly what she means by this, but who in America wants the government to decide who gets credit based on somebody's perception of your social worthiness? This is madness.
Does anybody know her party registration, by the way? I'm interested. Republican, Democrat, Socialist. There is a communist. There's a Communist USA Party. I just wonder, that might be something for you to explore. Now, you want to get hold of her thesis that was written at Moscow State University. And hold on, it's too good to be true. I want to read it so our viewers, our listeners can hear. The name of her thesis at Moscow State University was Karl Marx's Economic Analysis and the Theory of Revolution in the Capital. I guess that means Das Kapital. But in any case, will she pony up, whether it's in Russian or English or whatever?
Well, I want to see this in the original Russian. I don't want to see somebody's translated version. I want to see what was actually submitted. And we can get translators. We'll get a fair translation, and then we can evaluate this and obviously ask her questions about her views on this. So, yes, I am adamant about getting that from her. I haven't heard a response yet, but we just put the letter out this morning, so I hope a response will be forthcoming. But I also want to underscore, Larry, some of these radical ideas, radical is her description also, by the way, but some of these ideas she wrote about as recently as last year and the year before. These are very recently held views about nationalizing the banking system, having the Fed become the bank, having the Fed control wages and prices in our economy, having the Fed allocate credit based on some kind of social metric. This isn't stuff that we found in her thesis. We haven't seen her thesis yet. This is what she's written about in the last few years.
And I just want to say to everybody, listen, control of the currency is a big job. And it is a regulator of the national banks. It's also a regulator of smaller banks. And it sits on this, I've forgotten the name of it, but this board with the Treasury and the Federal Reserve.
The FSOC.
And the control. That's right, FSOC, which was created after the financial crisis to regulate the whole financial system.
That's exactly right. It is the primary regulator of all national banks, and it is the comptroller of the currency. It is the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, that determines whether and when and under what circumstances to issue new bank charters. So this is a very important, very powerful position, and I'm just shocked that any administration, including this one, would suggest this person to be the head of it all.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Senator, let's segue now to the debt problem. And let me just ask you, it's being reported that Republican leader Senator McConnell has offered a short-term solution to the debt problem, some kind of temporary, not a suspension, because I think he'd want $1 on it, but something that would be temporary before reconciliation. What can you tell us about that? Is that a real option? Is that a real live thing?
So I think that Senator McConnell is serious about something in this vein, and I think he's begun negotiations with Senator Schumer. I will tell you, Larry, candidly, my view is it is exclusively Democrats that want to go on this outrageous socialist big government spending spree. That spending spree is going to require more debt than we would require without it, and it should be up to Democrats to acknowledge the damage that they're going to do and do so by raising the debt limit themselves. As you know, there are procedures available to them that are not subject to a filibuster. Republicans couldn't block it if we tried. They don't want to go down that road because they want Republicans to be complicit so that they will insulate themselves somewhat from the political blowback that you alluded to in your opening comments, how increasingly unpopular this socialist spending spree is. I think we ought to leave it to them.
Yeah, you know, it's funny when Pelosi and Schumer and the president and so forth blaming Republicans. Senator, they didn't cut you in on their deal making when these budgets were constructed, whether it was the Bernie Sanders budget or the House budget. But they want you to come in and take the rap for increasing the debt. So you didn't have a chance to make policy, but they want you to take the blame for it. So I think you're on pretty solid ground.
Well, yeah. And by the way, as I mentioned before, and I'll say it again, they've had the opportunity 4 months now. They still have it. They can use the process that you know very well, the reconciliation process, and they can raise the debt ceiling without a single Republican voting for it, and there's nothing we could do to stop it. As I said, this is all about giving them political cover.
Let me just ask you one more thing. We're kind of running out of time, but it just occurs to me there's all these numbers being bandied about. You know, Joe Manchin said $1.5 trillion. Then people are saying he said he'd go to up to $2 trillion or whatever. Yeah. But I'm looking, you tell me if I'm wrong or where I should amend. I'm looking at the policy content. I'm looking at whether there'll be means testing of, frankly, existing entitlements, not just new ones, whether there'll be any workfare or time limits or education requirements. To me, those are things that are so vital to the economy, climbing the ladder of opportunity, you know, the social fabric of America. I mean, that's where we should be focused on, shouldn't we?
Well, absolutely. And those kinds of things like a work requirement or training requirement should be applied to the existing welfare state, and we should not be expanding it. This is, as you pointed out, this is all about making the middle class dependent on government. It's a terrible idea. And focusing on the dollar amount, yes, the dollar is scary. Yes, that's true. But they play games with the dollar amounts. They can use smoke and mirrors to pretend it's much lower. The go-to trick for them is to launch all these programs and just authorize spending for, say, a year or 2 years with every expectation that it's going to be made permanent. But officially, if it says only 1 or 2 years, why then the spending doesn't appear to be as much as we all know it's going to end up being. So you should not focus on the dollar. You ought to focus on the massive tax increases, the very, very ill-conceived programs. Oh, and by the way, the debt the idea that President Biden is telling us this costs zero.
Yeah.
That's like Barack Obama saying, "Oh, you can keep your doctor." But seriously, you really take Americans for fools?
Really? Really? That's why I used Lincoln's quote. So, Senator, there's a rumor that you are going to Moscow State University and you're going to give a speech that says, "Tear down this wall." Is that true?
I'm not, there's no truth to it, but I like it.
Senator Pat Toomey, as always, sir, thank you for helping us out. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Larry.
Up next.